is 7 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
We're going hot. We're coming in hot. Damn.
Hot damn.
Hot damn. Multi-cam. Hot. Coming in hot. And we have no idea if the sync is working or not. I didn't even mean for that to rhyme, but it kind of did.
As long as I'm not buzzing like last time.
Buzzing. Buzz.
Buzzing or
That's
something.
right. There was a horrible noise and crackling. You were like breaking out.
Crackling.
I think
yes.
Yeah. It's like being a teenager all over again. You were breaking out. Ah, dear. All right. I think we're going to come in on 3. Yeah. Oh, wait. Wait. I just need a little more prep time because, I just need it. Okay, that's looking good. Sounding good, methinks. And we're going to come in on a 3, 2, 1. This week on the Adobe Video CHiNWAG, we explore the hot damn ways of multicam plays, become seduced with sync sound boost, and handover exchanges without needing changes, invest in the best ways to multicam nest, and more. Join in the live stream with John Barrie and Paul Murphy this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to our 11th episode for season 2. Yeah, crazy, right?
Where does the time go? I remember I used to have to turn the air conditioning off when we did this show.
Oh, all right. That was summer then. It's not summer now. Not here. Not in Melbourne.
Not summer now.
No. Now, we want to double check that our audio is not horrid. There could be a lag. There could be a delay. So we want to know about that.
Could be the sound of my voice. Could be like a crackling.
We want to hear if there's a crackling, as in what we saw last week. So we want to be hearing whether or not things are sounding a-okay. Can you please give us some sort of heads up in the little chat box? Thank you very much. That will be awesome. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to feel a little under the weather.
Uh-oh.
About this time of year, I usually get like just a little head cold. About 3, maybe 4 days, and then I shake it off. It's gone. But there's this age-old thing. It's like, right, I do feel dry, right, dried out. Now you got to have your liquids. And some people are like, I have hot drinks, I have tea. People say just have water, but is it warm drinks? Is it cold drinks? What do you reckon? What's your thoughts?
I mean, if you're meant to be drinking water, then it doesn't matter what you're drinking. Like what you're drinking right now is perfectly fine because it's all water.
It's all water, brown water.
Yeah, well, that's fine.
So it's non-alcoholic, that one.
Yes, good.
So I think the alcohol is a no-no if you're trying to recover.
I would say so, yes. Yes.
That'd definitely be drying one out, which is, not the goal, to go the other way. All right, cool. Well, we're getting some good feedback on our audio setup, which is awesome because we're not...
Don't touch a thing.
I'm not going to touch anything. I think I did put a slight delay in your mic to get your mic in sync just a little bit more, but everyone's saying it's okay. Not touching dials, not touching the settings. So we're going to get into our topic. What's the topic this week?
Something about damn hot. It's damn hot. Something.
It's damn hot with the heater on. Multi-cam. All right. Hot damn multi-cam. So multi-cam for me, and I'm holding a brush. Don't ask why. I'm holding a brush.
When I think of multi-cam, I think paintbrush.
Do you know what I use this for, actually?
What?
This is an old trade secret with when I had gear and I'd show up when I was shooting, I'd always have a brush with me to just dust things off. So I'd dust back my keyboard, I'd dust all the stuff, right? Because it all gets a little bit of muck on it. And the camera, and you get in and you fuzzle around with it. So that's why I have this camera.
Okay.
Camera? It's not a camera, it's a paintbrush. Anyway.
It's a paintbrush.
I was just going to say that Multi-cam for me is one of the most underrated, on its own, underrated ways of getting things done inside of Premiere Pro. And when you and I first met, you were doing things with it that I would do, but I hadn't met anyone else that was doing those things. And I was immediately like, that dude, we're going to be mates. We're going to know each other more.
We're gonna do a show one day. I promise you.
When was that? Was like 8 years ago. Was that 8 years ago?
No.
Must have been.
We met. I think it'd been 9 years ago now.
Okay, so I would have been in Adobe
maybe before that.
A year.
Yeah.
Okay, still.
Yeah, I reckon you had.
That's a while back. So what was it you were using it for that's a little bit different?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is I think I use Multi-cam more for everything else other than actual multiple cameras. I used it extensively in broadcast because in broadcast you would cut a spot and then you would have to do like 20 different versions of it where the graphics would change. It would say tonight, tomorrow night, this Sunday, and you would have a different voiceover saying it as well. And what I would do was I would cut one promo and then I would use Multi-cam to iterate through those different graphics and those different voiceovers. So it's the same concept. It's switching between video and audio based on what you need, but I wasn't actually using anything filmed. And to be honest, in terms of like Multi-cam editing, I mean, it's probably 10% of what I do a year, if that. But I use Multi-cam every single day.
Yep. I use Multi-cam for Multi-cam. I keep holding this stupid brush. Go away. Oh, I think I broke it. I use it for Multi-cam, but in a slightly different way. But outside of that, I use it for a bunch of other reasons as well. And one of the things that I see more and more people finally getting used to using it for is sound sync. So when you got scratch audio on a camera that's not the audio you want to use, but you want to use like a proper recorded, nice microphone, full sound, then you can use the Multi-cam sequence, the Create Multi-cam sequence feature in order to do that for you quickly. And a lot of people don't realize that that's something that you can do. And it's the best practice. If you're using the one that you shouldn't use, and I've forgotten the name of it, if you can remember it. Merge clips. Which
theoretically, not theoretically, like in terms of logic, if I'm a brand new editor and I'm trying to put an audio and video file in sync together, something called merge clips would be the first thing I would reach for rather than something called multi-camera source sequence.
Yeah, it does make sense. It originally was planned to be used in that way, but then found out later on if you have to do what's called a handover, if you are working on something that needs to be used with an exchange format such as AAF or XML in order to do a grade or an audio mix, it can get things a little funky. So
and even without handover, there's some limitations to using merge clips where multicam is far superior.
Well, there's a lot more flexibility with multicam for sure.
Yeah,
totally. And proxies is also something else that comes into the mix. But we're not going to go down those rows. We're just going to stick to the multicam.
It's not a show about merge clips.
No, but there's a contextual connection. So
I get it.
Where are we going to start tonight, Paul? I think you've got your screen already set up and ready to go.
With my screen?
Sweet. All right. So those of you who are, before we get started, those of you who have been watching week to week, we have this this joyous beauty. Oh, look at that! Look at the way that the blue screen is freaking out.
It kind of looks like a reflection or something.
It does.
Like it's reflecting off it.
That is
pretty cool.
That's cool. So you get
like another universe.
If you log in and sign in and register for a chance to win this thing, you might get either the normal one or this hyper-colored reflective version. Now, there is a secret password each week. It's sitting just here. It will pop up at some point tonight. The link to go and register is in the description of either the Facebook group event that you've used to get here, or it's inside the live stream description inside of YouTube as well. So just want to highlight that that's a thing, and we're going to get started on the content. Now, if you've got anything you want to hear while we're going through, as always, jump in, let us know. You got any questions to do with what we're showing? We will certainly take your comments as a priority and kind of dive in and go down the rabbit hole. The reason why we do it live. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I would like to know, what is people's number one issue with multicam? Tell me what that is, and I'll try and address that before the end of the show, if I can. But I always like to start talking about multicam just by talking about the different ways of creating them.
Yep.
And I mean, the number one problem that I see with the way that people create multicam is they always have audio issues, and there are some easy rules and steps to know to avoid having any kind of audio issues with your multicam. My heart always drops when I look at an editor's timeline and they have the multicam clip here and they've just brought the source audio in underneath it. That's always a sign that somebody's given up on the audio, and it's going to cause you all kind of sync problems. So just setting up that audio the right way to start with is always key. And the first thing I would say to anybody who's about to create multicam inside of Premiere is you've got to set up your audio channels correctly. And when I say audio channels, I mean, see any one of these clips here, they all have one channel inside of them. And that means that all of this audio has been formatted as mono audio. So before you create your multicam source sequence, you want to go over to your media over here in the project, and you just want to select all of your audio and video. You want to go up to your menu, so clip and modify audio channels. The shortcut for that is Shift G, and you just want to make sure that everything is set to the same clip channel format. And the easiest way to do that is to use the presets here. And I'm going to bet that probably 99% of the time you want to do it with mono. So you want to have mono clips when you're creating this. The only time you would do stereo is if something was recorded with multiple cameras, with multiple microphones in a stereo position, or on occasion I have had to do this with 5.1 because I've got splits, like different splits from something that's already been mixed to 5.1. That's when I do that there. But this is the most important first step for you to do, is to make sure that everything is set to one audio channel format. Then I'm going to talk about the two different ways, the two most common ways of creating multicam in Premiere. Of course, there are third-party plugins that you can do this with, and the most common one would be JB. The most common one would be
Pluralize. Oh, right. Pluralize.
Pluralize, which I own a copy of it. It's great. It's very fast. But I think a lot of people don't realize that Premiere already does a lot of what Pluralize will do for you. And it also, by doing it inside of Premiere, you don't have to go out to another application and bring something back in. Because the number one problem I hear with Pluralize is, how do you then get it read as a multicam sequence inside of Premiere? So we're going to start with the automatic way of creating things with Premiere, and then we're also going to look at the manual way of creating these multi-camera source sequences. So I have some media down here. This is camera A, camera B, camera C, audio 1, and audio 2. And I'm just going to, I think to start with, I'm just going to select these first three clips, so camera A, B, and C. I'm going to ignore the audio for a moment, and then I'm going to go up to my clip menu, and I'm going to choose Create Multi-Camera Source Sequence. Now, of course, you can sync these using any of these different methods here: in-point, out-point, time code. I mean, it'd be great if we could all use time code, but it's really mostly on expensive projects that you'd be able to do that. We also have sound time code and probably the most common one that you're going to use, which is audio. So it's just going to analyze the waveform of all the different sources and figure out the sync itself. Just for the sake of a fast example, I'm going to stick with endpoints here. And the key thing you want to pay attention to is down here is where it says audio, it says sequence settings. And we have three options. We have camera 1, we have all cameras, and switch audio. So camera 1, although it's referring to a camera, what this means is it's going to give you a multi-camera sequence that has multiple video angles, but it only has one audio source. How do you tell it what that audio source is? Well, that audio source is going to be the first thing you selected. So you may recall that we were just selecting camera A, B, and C then. I'm going to choose camera 1 and click OK. That's immediately created our multi-camera source sequence here. I'm just going to drag this. Oh, there's a big mistake. I'm going to turn on insert and overwrite. And then I'm going to drag this into my sequence. And you can see that actually I have this as mono. So we've got two different channels here. Yeah. And these are coming from camera C. I must have clicked C first when I did this. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention at the time. And we also have three different angles. So we have camera A, B, C. The audio is coming from camera C, and it will only ever come from camera C because we're using one audio source here. Now, the reason I only picked those video cameras to begin with is because if I then selected all of these clips here, so I'm choosing camera A, B, and C, and I'm also choosing the audio only files, which is audio 1 and audio 2. So maybe these have come from like a boom and a love. Then I'm going to go up and choose clip, create multi-camera source sequence. I'm going to use the exact same settings, but I'm going to choose camera 1. Okay. Now let's have a look at what we get here. I'll drag this in, and what it's actually, you know, I've got my mapping turned off here, which is going to screw this up. What we have here is camera A, B, and C are our video, but look at what we've got for our audio. We've got camera C, camera C, camera C, camera C. These are actually, if I open up this file, I'm just going to hold down Command or Control, double click this to show you what we're looking at here. It's actually only giving me those audio files. So there's the first audio file, audio 2, and there's audio file 1, and it's muted all of these other video camera angles. And that's because if you choose camera 1 when you're creating your multi-camera source sequence and you have anything that's audio only, it's only going to give you those audio files. So it's actually going to ignore the camera audio there. So that's an important rule to keep in mind. It's going to choose the first camera angle that you have selected for audio, unless you have audio only files, in which case it's going to only give you those when you're using camera 1. So the next one is pretty straightforward. In fact, just to show you something a little bit funny, I'm going to select these out of order: camera A, camera C, B, and then 2, 1. Then we'll go up and choose create multi-camera. And let's use the clip names for this. I'm going to click OK. Oh, wait. I did that out of order. Ooh. I just used camera 1, and what I really wanted to do was give me all cameras. So we're going to say all cameras, which really means give me all of the audio. So everything that has audio that I have selected here, give it to me. When I drag this in here, you can see that we've got B. Well, actually, it's giving me the name of everything as B, but the actual order that it's brought all of that audio in is it's brought the audio only files in first. 1, 2, C, C, A, B, B. So it's paying attention to the order in which I've selected everything, but that audio only will always come first in the stacking order. Now, of course, you can change these around. You're more than welcome to switch the order of these inside of the multi-camera clip, but it's just good to know if you're trying to do a lot of these really fast, that selection order is going to make a difference to how these are coming up. And the last one, JB, we were talking about this a little bit earlier today. That's the switch camera options. So switch camera is actually going to switch the audio when we're switching the video as well. So we go to camera 1, we're going to go to audio 1 for that camera. So I'll show you how that works. I'm just going to select all of these, right click. I'm just going to right click this time. I'm not going to go to the menu, and I'm going to choose create multi-camera source sequence. And rather than all cameras, I'm going to go down to switch audio, and then I will drag this into my sequence. And now as I'm changing angles, I'm just using my shortcut keys here to change angles. You can see that it is actually changing the camera as well. So when I'm on camera C, it's giving me C. It's giving, well, actually, it's not changing the name of it there, but it's actually just switching between those different audio sources there. And you can't actually see it here, but it's given me the angles for those audio only files as well. So I can actually click here, and this is one of the audio only files with an empty video track. And I've got one here as well. So we can actually switch between audio only sources as well. And that's working with switch audio. So of course you would most commonly use that when you've got like 2 people being interviewed, you're cutting between them, and maybe you want to cut between their audio as you're changing angles. But JB, do you have a strong opinion on this one way or the other?
Yeah, I've tended to find I want all the audio out on the timeline that I'm cutting, and really just focus in on cutting the vision, and then just trim the audio later on. Because it's a bit weird when you're making cuts and then you got hard cuts in sync with the vision. When you're really in an interview, especially, it's usually where you got the isolated per camera microphone setup. You really want to do J cuts and L cuts, and that doesn't, it's a little tricky to kind of do that. I like to have all the audio out so I can hear everything, and then do an audio pass later on once I know that I've got the vision sort of at least passed, like thrown together, and then start to craft the story. You know,
not everything is like a straight back and forth in terms of audio, right? Like sometimes somebody's laughing at what somebody's saying. Sometimes somebody's talking over the top of what somebody's saying. And you actually want those 2 mics there. And you'll just sort of play around with the levels rather than cutting between them.
Yeah, you want to have them overlapping each other and stacked in the timeline itself. So that's usually that's how I've seen it and done it over the years when I used to do that sort of stuff. But very rarely have I ever really come across a customer that needs to make cuts where the audio is cutting with the vision. It can happen. It's rare, but yeah. Generally, it's sort of a better idea if you're new to it to just have the audio out. Normally, you'll have some sort of a mix of everything and might have isolated audio tracks, but bring them out.
Yes.
So there's a couple of ways to go about doing it.
So it is switch audio that I used to do that promo style use of multicam. So when I was using multicam to switch between different voiceovers and different graphics, that's what switch audio was doing, because it was changing the video and the audio at the same time.
Right.
So that is like the most common ways of creating it with the auto setting. But there is one other setting here that's really important to go through. And that is the ability to create a like a single source, what we call a single source multicam, whereas the default setting in Premiere is that if you have multiple clips that are on different time codes, it's actually going to assign different cameras to each new clip. But what you want to say to Premiere sometimes is, no, all of these clips have come from camera 2, all of these clips have come from camera 1. So to show you an example of that, I do have, actually I've got some audio here in the other bin here. I've got, so I've got the cameraman has been buttoning off and on. We've got camera 101, camera 102, and camera 103, camera 104, then camera 201, camera 202, 03, and 04. So 2 cameras, and the cameramen have been buttoning off as they went. So that's where the sort of classic way of doing this doesn't really work. And what you actually need to do, I'm going to select all of these clips and bring them up, create multi-camera source sequence. That's where, number one, we can only do this workflow if we're using time code, and we want to check create single multicam source sequence. And then it's going to ask me, how am I going to tell the difference between these two cameras? What's called the track assignment. And we have two metadata fields that we can play with. We can either choose camera label or camera angle. And to show you how this works, I'm just going to jump out of this. And I'm going to select all of the clips from camera 1. I'm going to go up to my metadata panel up the top. And this is sort of the hokey thing, is that if I go up to this metadata panel and I do a search on the word angle, it doesn't show up. What I actually have to do, this is kind of like when you're working in the project panel, you have to add that column in order to be able to see it. So I'm going to go up to my context menu for metadata. I'm going to go to metadata display, and I just want to do a search on the word angle. There it is, camera angle. I'll just check that to turn it on and click OK. And now when I do a search up here for the angle column, it's come up down here. And the whole reason that I'm doing this in the metadata panel rather than in the project panel is it means I can set all of these values at once. So I can just select them all and set the values at once. So the camera angle here is cam 1. And then I'll press enter to add that to all of those clips that I have selected.
Yep.
I'll do the same thing with cam 2. So I'll select these 4 clips, go up to the camera angle and choose cam 2. So now I've basically told Premiere what the difference between these two different cameras are, which is going to allow me to select all of these clips, right click and choose create multi-camera source sequence. I want to sync by time code. I want to create a single multi-cam source sequence. And I used camera angle, didn't I? I'm going to set this to camera angle. And I don't want to do switch audio. I'm going to do all cameras and click OK. Very quick. Time code is the fastest way to sync anything. If you've got time code to work with, it will sync it like that. If you've got an audio waveform, it's going to take a little bit longer. But now if I open up this multicam that I've just created here, I'm going to hold down the Command or Control key and double click. You can see it's put everything that's camera 1 on track 1, everything that's camera 2 on track 2.
Yep.
And an interesting little tip about working like this as well is if you've only got one camera and you don't want to have to go through the annoying step of going into the metadata panel and typing in cam 1 for all of those files, you can actually just do this by not assigning an angle at all. So you can just say camera angle equals nothing, and it will lay them all out on the same timeline. But that's only if you have one camera. If you've got more than one camera, you do have to go in and name the camera.
This is some very cool tricks, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much you can really do. And when you start using metadata this way, this is a really great example of taking that time to set things up the right way. And then when you execute, it's done.
Does it?
Right? Yeah, that's a really big one. So there's something that I've come across recently, and we'll stick to your screen there. So if you were to bring that particular clip into a new sequence as the multicam,
drag into a new sequence.
Yeah, create a new sequence from it, and just like that. And then this is something that happened on a feature where they had a lot of button on and off with the camera, and the audio kept going, and then they were like, oh, how do we isolate where the shots are? Because it was like a 20-minute take from the audio recording, but there were sort of just this multiple button on and offs with it. So with that, if you right click on the clip itself, it's in there, and then go to scene detect, the new scene detect feature.
I love
it. Does an
that.
analysis, and it actually cuts, and in this case, you're going to add markers into the clip to let you know where the vision actually cuts on and off. This button on and off.
This entire meeting has just made me very happy because I'd never thought of that. That's so cool.
I was stoked when I heard that they'd used this on a production. I was like, that's ingenious.
That's so clever. That's so clever.
It's really cool.
So do you think it's going to make a cut to the audio as well, or just to the vision?
Good question. I think
let's
it's
find
gonna
out
cut
together.
through, but let's check it. Let's have a look. So it does have to do an analysis of the audio. At the front end, it takes a little bit, but then on the back end, it's pretty quick. But yeah, this is a fascinating way of just going through and setting it up automatically in the background while you do something else. You know, have a drink, go to the loo, all the rest of that good stuff.
All of that stuff.
Read through notes, producer's notes, and then come back and then you go, oh, now I can just jump to cuts.
I'm so excited to see this. This better not let me down, JB.
I did it today as well. In prep for this, I was like, ooh.
Look at that.
So.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
That is just so cool.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So if you were to then jump through and start to select, so with that auto selection function that the playhead lands on the clip, I tend to, if I know I want to close the gaps, then I'll go through and start to delete them, and then I can do a remove gaps function in the sequence and do it that way and just sort of tighten it right
faster, up. Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think this has nothing on it at all too. So that would go there.
And the other thing as well, you'll notice that it's actually blank. There'll be areas where it's like got, see how you got the yellow at the top? That tends to indicate there's vision in that particular clip. And then let's have a look. Oh, so that's actually a different camera angle right there.
Yeah, so the camera 1 is empty. There's no camera 1, but there is a camera 2. So it makes sense that the scene detection would be based on whatever the selected camera is.
Yeah. So one of the tricks, the other tricks that I was trying to work out, you could use to sort of hack something through this is that if you flatten it and make it a nest, right, just a standard nested track, then you're going to get all the vision. And it doesn't matter. You'll get a collapsed version of vision and then run it, then convert it and turn it back into a multicam. And then that way it's going to cut and you won't lose any potential video frames. Because if you've got, say, camera 1 is off, but camera 2's on, like in this case, you don't want to have it chop things where it goes, oh, actually, there was a way to switch to camera 2.
There was something,
Yeah. So it's a little bit.
There is another
poking around.
There is another cool thing is if you open the multicam in the source, you can just use the arrow keys, and that will just jump between the cuts on inside the actual multicam.
Yep. It's the same as if you open up any kind of sequence. If you open the sequence inside the source, you can do the same thing. Where you just jump between the cuts. Yeah.
I get the feeling as though you're not permitted to do that with, they don't let you do open sequence in timeline with multicam.
That's because it's a multicam.
Because it's a multicam,
Yeah. And it would confuse people too, because people think you start doing multicam and you actually cut from there, which is what you do in some other NLEs. But in Premiere, you don't. Yeah. You have to have it in that one program panel with that multicam view. That's how you actually do multicam.
Yeah. Which makes sense. Makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah.
I have one more thing I want to show.
Yeah. Show it.
Yeah.
Go.
And that is, so I've sort of gone through the process of creating things automatically inside of Premiere, but there are times when you have to create things manually. And in fact, on certain projects that I've worked on, horrible decisions have been made on set where I would have no sync sound in camera, no time code, no matching time code. And the reality was all of that multicam stuff was going to have to be built from scratch. I would watch people talking soundlessly and go, I think he just said that thing that he said in that audio file over there, and have to find it was horrible. But during that process, I came up with a really quick way of creating multi-camera source sequences manually. Of course, any any nested sequence can be just automatically turned into a multi-camera source sequence. That's all that a multi-camera source sequence is if I actually open this up, this is multi-camera here in my source, and I just right click this, I can go up to the multi-camera menu and just say disable. So disable its multi-camera ability. When I do that, if I go back to the project panel, it just turns into a normal sequence. I will just double click it and it behaves like a sequence. If I actually wanted it to go back, it's just the same thing. Multi-camera enable, it goes back to being multicam. That's really all that's happening at the basis there. But if you want to create these manually, the place that you can really get messed up is in the audio. Because a sequence by default will try and mix everything down. So it will try and mix everything down to, say, a stereo sequence, whereas in a multi-camera sequence, everything should be multi-channel. It should be sending the audio from just that track out to its own individual channel. So just to show you what a multi-camera sequence should look like in terms of the way it's set up, here's one that I've created beforehand. I'm going to open this up on the timeline here. And where you want to look first is this is a multi-channel sequence. And I can tell that because even though these are standard tracks, I can see these are standard tracks. If I go down to the very bottom of the sequence down here, I can see there's a number here next to the master track. And this says 32, which means it's actually outputting 32 individual tracks. So if you see a number there, then you know your sequence is multi-channel. So that's the first thing you need to do if you are creating these manually. The other thing you need to do, and this is where I start to roll my eyes at the sort of manual labor involved here, is if you go over to your audio track mixer, you need to, first of all, set up your tracks in terms of pairs, so routing them in pairs. So track 1 and 2 is going to audio 1 and 2, audio 1 and 2. Track 3 and 4 is going to route to channel 3 and 4, channel 3 and 4. And then you need to set your panning from left to right for those individual channels. So it always has to go left, right, and that's how you're splitting out the individual channels. So if you've got a multi-camera sequence that has 10 channels of audio, 10 individual audio tracks, this can be quite annoying to have to set up every time, which is why I came up with a workflow that is really fast, and you can also create a template out of it, which will make it even faster next time. What I do when I'm creating these manually is I go over to my new item button and I create an offline file, and you can just ignore the video settings because you can change them as much as you want later. And I'm just going to make sure that the audio format is set to the format that I actually want for my individual channels, which of course is going to be multi-channel. And then I'll click OK. Then I want to duplicate this clip. So Shift, Command or Control / I'm going to duplicate that offline file. So I've got 2 of the same file here, but for the second one, I'm going to double click this and I'm just going to change it from audio and video to video. So this is a video only track now. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the video track and I'm going to select the video and audio track. I'm going to go up to Clip, Create Multi-Camera Source Sequence, and I'm going to create a multi-camera source sequence just out of those 2 files. I'm going to say all cameras and you can just sync using timecode. That's fine. Click OK. And what this has created is a multi-camera source sequence that I will be able to use in any situation. So it's going to make sure that every single audio file is going out. Track 1 is going to channel 1. Track 2 is going to channel 2. It's already set up all of the routing for me. As you can see here, there's 1. This one is going to 2. So it's already done all of that work for me. And now I can just reuse this or create a sequence preset out of it every single time I want. You just delete that offline media and then drag your media into this to use it. But it's already set up for you. You can use as many of those audio tracks as you want. This is 32 individual audio tracks. So if you wanted to reduce that down to something a bit more manageable in your timeline, all you would need to do is go over to your file and you want to go up to clip, modify audio channels, and change the number of tracks that you have here. So you can see I have 32 there, but let's say I actually only had 4 mono. And that would just ensure that every time I drag this into a sequence, it's only going to bring in 4 mono tracks rather than 32 that I would then have to delete. So that's just my quick way of creating manual multicam.
Woohoo. See, this is why I have guest speakers on and guest hosts. I don't use the tools every single day, so I don't have to face these things. This is awesome. This is really cool.
Yeah.
Undead Will Destroy All was curious about this particular way, and that there's other ways you can set up this without having to do the mono sort of audio tracks. And I just queried, well, yes, you can, but most of the time when you want to do multicam related work where you want to have the isolated audio channels. So it's not, even though it's recorded with stereo pairs, usually you have left and right channels, or channel 1 and 2 would be dedicated microphones. If you're on a broadcast camera or you've got some kind of a professional recording kit, that's usually how it's done. Or you've got different levels of the recording on one channel and sort of brighter on another. So then when there's something loud, you can go over to the softer recorded audio and not have it peak. Things like that. So, yeah, that was kind of my query. But then they were like, oh, wow, no, actually, this is pretty cool. But this is one of the fun things with having a slight delay between what I'm hearing and seeing you do and the comments that are coming through. So...
And the other important thing to remember as well is you cannot do any kind of audio mixing with inside a multi-camera clip, because it will get rid of your audio waveforms. So even if you throw a volume effect on one of the clips and don't even adjust the volume, it will get rid of all of those waveforms for that multi-camera clip. So the only audio effect that you can add to a multi-camera clip that will keep the waveforms intact is gain. So you can adjust the gain inside a clip, but outside of that, you don't want to add any audio effects inside, and you don't want to do any kind of track mixing inside of your multi-camera clip as well.
Yeah. Something that to do with that particular topic there is that when things do go away, like the audio waveform disappears, it's usually because there's some change to the original direct channeled through, just sort of going straight out. And editors still like, it sounds right, but I just want to see it. So the way to bring it back is you render the audio in the timeline and it brings back the waveform. So if you have done some kind of a mix down or some sort of an effect at the front end of it, like inside it, that then it needs to render that new waveform out. So when you load a clip and it does all that blue line sort of loading stuff, it's preparing things to be used. Part of that preparation is setting up the waveform file. And when you make changes to the inside of the multi-clip and then you use that inside and edit, it's not reading, therefore, the same prepared waveform. So you have to render that back out. So that's just a little thing. So people freak out and they go, but the waveform's gone. Yes, you still hear it. You got to rebuild it by rendering the audio in the timeline.
I have just ranted for 20 minutes about creating multi-camera source sequences. I would like to know a bit more about cutting.
All right. There's a few things to do with cutting. I will get on to. So let me bring up my screen. Cool. And I'll let you, Paul, go through the commentary as it's flying at us.
Of course. Oh, slow down, guys. Slow down.
Oh, wow. So let's see. I might actually turn the audio off because I don't want this to sort of come through too often. Because it will come through, my audio will come through your what you're hearing. Anywho, you can see here that I've actually got a multicam going on, and if you have a look, at what's happening here. Let me just get rid of that essential graphics, going into the editing view. Very nice. And then I'll bring up my, whoops, put you over there, buddy. The view here so I can see how many angles I've got. So I've actually got 3 camera angles, and I've already gone through and started to chop things up. Now this was for doing a demo where all I had was a recording of my face with the camera, and then I had a recording of my screen, and then you can see I've built like a third channel, a third camera angle by nesting something. But what I did before I went through and decided to kind of lock in when the cuts would be, I've just scrubbed through and started to do some cutting on the fly, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So cutting in faster than real time. The way I'm going to do that though is I'm going to also show you another trick where if you duplicate and put on the very top there another track, notice this is one continuous track, and then you highlight just V2 in this case, right? We're just looking, it's just going to be, oh, I've turned it off. There we go. It's on now. So you can see now it just stays on that one camera angle the entire time, even though underneath I've got other cuts, and that's because of that top-down way that you see video, right? It's stacked and it's got an order and it's a top-down view. So in this case, I'm going to show you that you can have, depending on what is highlighted here on the right side of the video tracks, V2's on. So when I start making edits, it's actually happening on V2. V1 gets ignored. Now I will cut this with my JKL moves here, and I can see when I'm just talking crap and then it's like, oh, something's happening on screen. Oh, okay. So there's a bit of talking and a bit of, so a little bit of both, me talking more, maybe mixing what's going on screen. Now I want to see that a bit closer. And you can see how I can quickly, faster than real time, hitting L a few times to just get to like 8x speed, I can visually start to figure out where the action might really be and use that as a pass. And then I can come back and I refine that. So there's a couple of things that I've shown in this. One is being able to get a pass through faster than real time. And then the other is that you can have an alternate edit going on here where if you like, you know what, I like the bulk of what I've cut here, but I think I might want to try multi-camming this a bit differently somewhere else. And so at any point in time, you can decide, well, you know what, I'm just going to from there, let me just get my keyboard shortcuts to work properly for me for a sec. I'm just going to trim this bit. And just between here and there, I think, and let's think of it like a music video where you would do a multi-cam and just try slightly different variations on the way you'd cut. You can go in and then set that up and start doing a slightly different cut and using keyboard shortcuts as well. So the number keys across the top are going to, that's 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 1, 2, right? So that gives me an option to say, well, director, do you like that variation? They go, yeah, I don't know. I want to see the other variation. Fine, let's just turn that off. And we can go and unenable that. And then go and watch it in context with the original edit that was done before. You can do this several times. Are
you much of a live cutter? When it comes to multicam, do you prefer to hit the numbers as you go, or are you slower and more thoughtful?
No, I'll do it in a couple passes. So I'll scream through and just get that sense of what's going on, and it always depends on the complexity. But usually I'll have my fingers over 1, 2, 3, and then if I need to use more camera angles because there's more to use, then I'll click the mouse over the other ones. So I'll have my mouse ready to hit like 4, 5, or 6, but always I know one's usually the go-to in most cases. It's kind of how I approach it and structure it. So if you got a wide shot,
I am such a slow thinker when it comes to editing. It always takes me like 3 steps before I can go, oh, I really should be cutting to the other person now. So live cutting, I think, would just make more work for me than anything.
Yeah. I tend to do things in passes for a couple different reasons. So one might be I'll make this, what I've done here, a version. So the sequence will become a version, and then I'll go back and I'll make another version of it. So I'll go and reveal, where are we here? Reveal sequence in project. I have a keyboard shortcut for that. And then I'll make that maybe, pass 1 or pass 01. And then I'll make a duplicate of that. And then I'll rename that one pass 02 and make sure I open it. And then when I've got that open, I will make sure I close everything else. So this is actually something that I was saying needs to go in the product, and it did go in because there were other competitive products that did this, where you can close other timelines. Boom. And now it's just got the one that I know I need to concentrate on. And I don't know how many times I've seen this happen where you go, oh, cool, I've renamed it. I've got a duplicate, I've named that. And then go back and continue editing, only to realize later on, like, oh, I forgot to open my duplicate.
And the cool thing there is that they make the distinction between close other timeline panels and close panels in group, which means if you have separate pancake timelines, you can just close the timeline in that stack of the pancake.
Yep. And for those who are not familiar with the pancaking stuff, so I've just held the control key on a Windows machine or a command key on the Mac to double click on the multicam to open the multicam. So I might want to put this side by side so I can see, although I have to say there's so much space that gets wasted here. So probably a better idea to put it on top, which is the pancaking concept. And I like to have my tracks as tiny as possible as well. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Depends what I'm working on. When I was working on a film for 2 years where every track layout in every sequence was exactly the same, I was constantly using the preset track heights, because it'd be like, okay, I'm going to work on dialogue now. Okay, let's make dialogue big, collapse everything else. All right, now I need to edit some music. Make music big, collapse everything else. That was a huge time saver.
Yeah, it depends as well. And again, my concept of doing passes, I sort of rush through and it's kind of... So before I got into filmmaking and TV and stuff, I was a freehand artist. And so the concepts that I bring from that, I brought over with me, where I sketch things out. Yeah, exactly. I start to build like a form and a shape and a structure first. And once I've done that,
so the first edit, you call that the gray lead edit.
Yeah, pretty much. But it might even just be like just really broad, light strokes, as to say, this is kind of the basic shape of what I'm going for. And over time, you start to build it in and then rub parts out and maybe even come in with the different, like you start with a very basic gray lead and you finish with something that might be a black pen, like an ink pen, or it could be a brush that you use depending on the style of what you're going for. And then, after that, you can rub out all the things underneath and then you can start to do color. And I originally was getting into animation, and that's where you use cellular. And so the concept of stacking like this is a similar process where you go, right, so I've got options and then I'm going to color underneath. And so that's how I approach it. It's just a different way. I tend to... For me, I found I was faster than many other editors that I was working with, where they would try to get the fine cut going as they were going. They were trying to make the fine cut. But then I realized the producers I was working with, they'd go, yeah, no, that section is not structurally working, just blow that away. And it's like, oh, I've just done so much work to fine cut that. And now you're saying
just rotoscope that whole
get
section.
rid of it. Yeah. So I wait until they go, story structure's done. It's locked. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine tune the actual cut points. And I do that the last pass. And the same with the grade as well. I'll approach it in the same sort of way. But yeah, we got slightly sidetracked there. So
it's all in good fun.
I'm going to close now the panels in the group. I've only got, well, I don't have that many panels in there, but I'll just close the one I don't want.
Show us your screen, John.
Oh, my bad. Here we go. Okay, so got my screen up and running again. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about in here to do with the way that you can make cuts is, let me just turn this V1 back on, and I'll just get rid of that second set just to keep things nice and neat. I'm going to make everything a little higher so we can see. Is to do with, as you're cutting, even though on this cut here, I might realize that there's probably more going on the screen that I need to worry about. So as I'm screaming through, and again, this is just me doing sort of quick passes where I'll do an alternate version of what angle I've decided to go with. All I need to do is hover over the top of it and then tap the key to swap it out. And so that there, I can now swap out to camera 1. Now I'm not live cutting. I'm just swapping. So
yes,
that's using the 1, 2, 3, 4 QWERTY part of the keyboard. Now there's another way that you can use keyboard shortcuts, and this is all standard stuff. You can use Control and then use a number. So let's just zoom in here a bit. So what happened there? It actually cut to that shot. I'll just undo it. So we've got here PTC, which is I forget what PT stands for. PTC to something. Piece to camera. So while I'm in here, if I just tap 2, it will swap the entire range to 2. But if I realize that based on audio cue or some other cue, I need to actually cut it, but I don't want to have to do it while I'm playing. Instead of doing a, say, Control K and then go in and say, well, now that needs to be 2, it goes to 1, that's too much of a waste of time. So if I know that this needs to, at that point, cut from camera 2 to camera 1, I can have Control 1. And now I've got camera 1 and before it camera 2. So this is
that's how I do it.
Right.
That's how I do it.
So you do it right. So you'll hear it and see it and feel when you go, oh, this is where the cut should be, and then find based on moving frame by frame to find that right point in time to then cut it that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
The my cut points, I totally get what you're saying about fine cut and rough cut and stuff, but still my cut points where I choose to cut doesn't change very much from, you know, the initial cut to the end cut. Like I'll still try and build up that structure and not get too lost in the weeds. But yeah, I'm usually pretty precise about my cut points.
So let me ask you this then. When you're, so the kind of jobs I did mainly were cooking show stuff. And they always ramble on. They crap on.
Multi-camera?
Oh, yeah.
Multi-camera?
Yeah. Oh, my God. There's so much crap. So it's a matter of finding the story structure.
It's a matter of survival.
Well, sometimes you just got to whip through. And we always use the audio as a guide to whip through where it's like, there's silence here. Double check it. Okay, they're resetting to go back a bit and kind of overlap something. So then we've got a nice way to cut back in. But sometimes there's just crap. It just goes way too long. So that's where I would try to reduce the edit that way.
The editor of Breaking Bad, I remember listening to her talk. Someone, Dixon, I've forgotten her first name, but she said if you're going to be an editor and you're going to work with multi-camera source material, you've got to learn how to look at all of those angles at once. That's the best way to do your rushes, is that you've got to learn to look at like 4 different angles at once for a scene.
Yep.
And memorize what you're seeing too.
Yeah. It's that's something that I also wanted to talk about here, is that when you're cutting like this, so if you've got an external monitor, you can actually turn off the duplication of seeing your switched out view. So if I go to the wrench in there, I can say show multi-camera preview monitor, turn that off, right? So when I'm in transmit, enable transmit, and the transmit's going out to another screen, it's transmitting what I'm actually seeing as a finished cut in the timeline, and I can just concentrate and make this as big as I need it to be in order to see the action with multiple cameras. Because if it's too small, you really can't see very well what's going on. And so that's another little tip there that helps you kind of see.
The other thing is the ability to be able to transmit that multicam view is good for fastidious producers who want to look over your shoulder and see everything that's going on.
Yep. So there's another
to be able
option there as well to do just that.
Output all those angles. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Now there's something that's fairly new that people have asked me about. Some broadcasters have asked me about, and it's this new auto adjust multi-camera playback quality. That is specific to ProRes files that are being used in a multicam. It doesn't yet go to any other codecs.
But it does work. I have tested it and it does work.
It is specifically today optimized for ProRes.
Yeah.
Where it will,
I got 9 HD ProRes cameras playing smoothly all at once.
Right. I might move our head because I think a lot of people couldn't see what I was pointing out there. Right, just down the bottom there. So there's the show multi-camera preview monitor, which I'm just turning on and off. And then the one at the very bottom here, you've got transmit multi-camera view. That's the bit that can go out through transmit as well. There is something else here that some people may not have caught. It's been around for quite a while, and that's to edit the cameras. So even though you can go inside the sequence and start messing around with what is on camera track 1 being camera angle 1, what's on camera track V2, V3, and manually go in and kind of move them away, then restructure the order, it's actually a bit easier if you go into this edit cameras option and literally drag and drop things around. So now my piece to camera is not camera 1, it's camera 3. Now what's interesting is that that only is affected based on the selected camera that I've got right now. So if I was to zoom in here, where we can see I've got camera 1 is actually the full screen view. And then I come over to this side, camera 2 is the full screen view. And camera 1 is still my head. So it's actually contextual. The point where you decide to edit cameras is going to be sticky to the selected multi-camera clip that has been cut, in this case, from there on. And it won't affect anything else that's not part of that selection. So just be
and you can also turn you can also turn cameras off as well, which is good if you know you've got a Zoom call with 9 people, but you're really just cutting that section where 2 of them are talking to each other. Get rid of all those other angles. It will save you space in your multi-camera window.
Yeah. So yeah, you can totally do that too. Another thing is you can change how many camera angles you're seeing per what we call page. So in this one, I'll make 1 camera angle per page. And then here I've got this page 2, page 3. And I can dial in where I'm looking at them from that way. So I can kind of cycle through. But that's really cool if you've got quite a lot and your brain can only deal with maybe 8 or 9, but you've got, say, 20 camera angles to deal with. Again, the concept of doing things in passes is not a bad one, because there tends to be times when you'll throw, at the end of the day, you've only got one camera angle that you're showing at any one point in time. And usually you've got this ridiculous amount of coverage because there's a lot of stuff that's going on, but it's not necessarily all happening all at the same time. You'll go over to cameras that are doing things in one area, and then you'll make your way back over to another area. But very seldom do you need to be constantly swapping out camera 20 with camera 4, right? They'll design them in clusters. So then the action is moving tends to be moving mostly in clusters as well. So yeah, that's kind of the concept of this paging stuff, which you control through that edit cameras option. There we go. So that's a little bit more of that to do with the actual editing parts. All right. Do we have any commentaries?
Cedric is just saying that it's good to set all that stuff up before you start cutting.
Yes. You should have a very clear idea of what your goals are and how to get there. You can be making changes along the way, but you can also start tripping yourself up if you make those changes along the way. Again, it's the same with anything that we're doing in this industry. You learn through experience, and you're going to learn how to predict what you'll need the more you do these types of jobs as well. So you may not have it set up quite right from the beginning each time.
Although I would say if you're on a big production where there's going to be a handover at the end, this is the thing that needs to be done right by the right person beforehand.
Yes.
Because I have seen I've consulted on too many productions where an assistant, for example, has not fully understood how to do this in Premiere in a way that hands over to Pro Tools or DaVinci nicely, and they've just hit a brick wall at the end of the production, basically.
Yep. And so that's what I'm going to sort of talk about here. Now, what you were showing before about having multiple button on and offs, I went and did that today in the office to test this out. And then you can see I've gone and used the scene detect to have where the button on and off functionality works.
Oh, it's so good. So good.
It's pretty good.
If anything good has come out of this, that's it. I love it.
It is pretty cool, I must admit. So if you're starting to do edits and you need to we're using, in this case, I'm using this particular method of, if I go inside there and I make these higher, we can see that I've actually got recorded sound that was like unbroken, isolated recording through this nice microphone here, and then the camera mic, which is really, really low. You can see there it's not very good. So the scratch audio is a bit yuck. So that's all been muted and turned off. We're using this to do our merge clips without using merge clips, but it gives us the ability to cut away as though these are separate clips to work with. So I'm going to do some sort of J-cut things and try to treat this as though it was actually an edit where I've got, let's see here, I've got overlapping things. I'm going to do some basic, let me turn off the multicam thing and just treat this like a normal clip, right? So I'm going to do some scaling. I'm also going to do some things to like the gray. Oh, that's actually black here. So do some effects in here. So this is the concept of adding effects, and then when you got to pass this down somewhere, you kind of want to make sure it's not, things aren't getting lost and mistranslated when you do that exchange. So let me bring up a good old, what's a good old effect for demos? Blur.
Blur.
Blur. Let's use the good old Gaussian blur. How do you pronounce that particular effect?
That is the correct pronunciation.
Gaussian?
Gaussian?
Gaussian.
I've heard Gaussian.
Gaussian.
I've heard Gaussian.
Gaussian, right?
I believe the correct pronunciation is Gaussian.
Gaussian. Okay. Well, you know, tomato, all that jazz. Now, in order for this to get handed over for a color grade, if you've got anything that's inside a multicam, it's not going to translate properly through an XML. So what you need to do is select everything that you've got that is of multicam origin, right-click on it, go to the multi-camera, and then choose flatten. Now, when you do this, it is going to not be undoable. So best practice would be what I did earlier. Reveal this sequence in the project, make a duplicate, and then name this one flatten. So I'm going to put underscore flat. I'm going to open that one, and then I'm going to make sure I close all the other timeline panels because I don't want to flatten the wrong one. Double checking says flat. All right, select all, right click, multi-camera, flatten. Now, it's actually using the real audio, not the nested multicam audio, and the same with the vision as well. Now, I had some scaling on that. It's maintained the scaling. This one, I had an effect. The effect has been maintained as well. So when you do the flattening, the XML is using proper understanding of which file, which clip is being used. It's not in a container that it doesn't quite translate properly for, and it allows you to, go through and have a clean exchange. Now, I've got something here I want to just sort of do a quick test on here. So there's one clip in here that is actually still multicam, and I'm going to do a select all, right, to make things a little bit easier. Just select all. Make sure I right click on a clip that is a multicam, go into multicam and flatten. So now it's flattened the only multicam clip that's part of that selection and made that adjustment to it. Meaning anything else that I've cut that was not a multicam, even though it was part of the selection, means that I've just select all and then use that flatten function. It's only affected anything that was still in multicam mode. So that's a really nice trick to be able to quickly flatten everything rather than search through and go, well, what's the ones that are multicam and what's the ones that are not? This is just going to help you get through with confidence that you're flattening just the bits that need to be flattened. Everything else will stay as is.
I think Cedric is challenging my pronunciation of Gaussian.
Oh, look out, those South Africans.
I think he's suggesting it's Gaussian.
It's Gaussian.
Which it is not.
Well, where's the origins of the word? That's the end of the day.
Well, that's what I found myself getting distracted by. Carl Friedrich Gauss.
Oh.
The Gaussian blur is one kind of blur filter that uses a mathematical formula to named after German astronomer and mathematician Carl Friedrich Gauss.
Well, I think I'm going to side with you there on that one.
Because I have the Googles.
You have the Googles. Awesome. All right. Well, this is kind of where we're going to wrap it up. We tried not to jam pack it with too much. We've gone a little bit over time, but not too bad.
That's not unusual.
No, not at all. If you've got any further things that you want us to talk about, or this topic is now sort of set off some little things in your lizard brains to go, oh, now I'm curious about that bit and that other bit, send us a message on the Facebook group. Go into the page for the Adobe Video CHiNWAG and leave us a comment in there. Post something in there. Or go to the stream that is going to be on the replay in YouTube and put a comment in there as well. We'd love to hear what you're interested in and the other things. Next week, we're going to be looking at some storage-related stuff.
More
interesting. To come, but that will be the final episode. So, you've made it to the end. You've made it to the end. Normally, I do this somewhere in the middle, right? So, it's in context. Is it not? Maybe I'll just, for those at home, make it a little easier. Cool. So yeah, if you want this amazing semi-transparent, look at it, semi-transparent. Oh, if I bring it back, that's interesting. The lighting.
Oh yeah, it's just the edges.
Well, I think it's just how close I am to the lighting. It slightly shifts the shade of blue.
Yeah.
And it becomes the purple that it truly is as it gets a little further back. The shine comes off it. Yeah, weird. Yeah, that is kind of weird. Flatten. Flatten is the word. Go nuts.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends. Now, next week, I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to have a 12th registration, because how am I supposed to do that and it be fair for those that watch the replay?
Yeah, shouldn't it be the announcement next week?
It will be. So this is your last chance to get in and register.
Last chance. Yeah.
To be in the raffle. The randomizer will pick the cell number, and everyone's entries will be sitting inside a spreadsheet. It's going to be that geeky. And then that cell number will come up, and then I'll line it up with who it is that sits in that cell number.
Exciting.
Exciting stuff. Good to go. All right. Well, thanks, Paul. You always,
Thank you, John.
Always show me new stuff, and you blow my mind. And I'm so happy that you're able to share and impart that knowledge with everyone else.
Got a new video coming out in 2 hours too.
Oh, cool. Are you going to give us a little sneak on what the topic is?
Let's just say that I got no clever ways to say it. It's just an interesting sort of retro style transition that I've been using a lot. Actually, here's the story. I had to create a retro style transition. I knew I had to pay for it, and I was like, no, I can do that myself. So I figured out how to create a retro style transition entirely in Premiere without paying for the plugin.
And how long did it take you to design it and figure it out?
It probably took me too long, but the actual video itself goes for 4 hours. But like I really I spent days trying to crack it, because it's like how do I get it to look just like this VHS here? How do I get it to look like that?
That's funny.
Took me days, but the end product will only take you about 4 minutes.
Well, there you go. So everyone, you are getting the shorthand version of how to do it from
how the sausage is made,
A to Z, with skipping all the other alphabetic components in there that our good friend Paul has gone and put all the tireless energy and hours into figuring out all out. And pretty sure, based on what I'm sure you're worth per hour, you probably would have been better off to pay for the plugin.
Yeah,
and just have it done.
Probably.
But the world gets to know now how to do it without needing to do that, and in a handful of minutes. So, kudos to you.
That's why we do it.
That's right. All right. Thanks again, Paul. Thanks everyone for joining us on the live stream. Ciao for now. We'll see you next week for episode 12, the final in our second season. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This week on the Adobe Video CHiNWAG, we explore the hot damn ways of multicam plays, become seduced with sync sound boost, and handover exchanges without needing changes, invest in the best ways to multicam nest, and more. Join in the live stream with John Barrie and Paul Murphy this Wednesday at 7 p.m. Melbourne time.